Close your eyes and imagine Britain in the 1960s. Red brick breweries rising over railway lines, the air heavy with steam and hops, pub signs swinging gently in the evening wind. Names like Bass, Whitbread, and In Coop were once part of daily life, spoken without thought, trusted without question. For many watching today, these breweries are childhood memories. For others, they are ghosts hidden beneath car parks and shopping centres. If you enjoy uncovering Britain's forgotten past, please like and subscribe before we continue, because the story of how these breweries vanished is far more unsettling than you might expect. 1. Watney's Brewery, when Britain drank the same pint. For decades after the Second World War, Watney's was everywhere. Founded in London and expanded relentlessly through the 1950s and 60s, Watney's pubs stretched from the capital to provincial high streets, their red signage as familiar as bus stops and postboxes. For many drinkers, Watney's wasn't a choice. It was simply the beer. By the late 1960s, Watney's Red Barrel had become a symbol of modernity. Kegged, filtered, consistent, identical from pub to pub. To some, it represented progress. To others, it tasted like something had been taken away. Traditional cask ales disappeared, cellars went quiet, pub landlords lost control over what they served. The backlash was fierce. Campaigns like Camera emerged in the early 1970s, driven by drinkers who felt betrayed by what they called industrial beer. Watney's became the villain of that story, not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. By the 1980s, the brand that once unified Britain had become shorthand for everything people hated about mass-produced beer. Breweries closed, pubs were sold, Watney's quietly faded. When it vanished, it wasn't just a brewery that disappeared, it was an era of conformity Britain no longer wanted to drink. 2. Courage Brewery, London's pride, swallowed whole. Courage was London through and through. Founded in the 18th century and rooted in the city's working districts. Courage best. Bitter became a staple of London pubs for generations. Dock workers, clerks, cab drivers, this was their pint. Dependable, familiar, unremarkable in the best possible way. By the 1960s and 70s, Courage pubs formed a vast tied estate across the capital. The name stood for stability, tradition, a sense that some things would always remain. But behind the scenes, the brewing world was changing fast. Mergers arrived. Takeovers followed. Courage was absorbed into ever larger conglomerates. Its identity diluted with each deal. Decisions were no longer made in London boardrooms, but in distant corporate offices. Profit margins mattered more than place. Production was consolidated. Breweries shut. Recipes altered. By the time the Courage name finally disappeared as an independent force, most drinkers barely noticed the moment it happened. That was the tragedy. Courage didn't collapse in scandal or failure. It was simply consumed, until nothing distinct remained. London lost not a beer, but a quiet, everyday companion. 3. Truman's Brewery, the last breath of the East End. For nearly 3 centuries, Truman's stood at the heart of East London. Its Brick Lane brewery dominated the skyline. Red brick walls rising above railway arches and narrow streets. Every morning, the smell of malt drifted through Spitalfields and Whitechapel. Locals didn't need a clock. The brewery told them the time. Truman's beers were never flashy. They didn't need to be. This was honest East End brewing, serving dock labourers, market traders, and families who measured life in shifts and seasons. Brewery drays rolled out daily, rattling over cobbles, delivering beer to pubs that felt like extensions of the street itself. But the East End changed. Industry moved out. Land values rose. By the late 1970s, the brewery sat on land worth more than the beer it produced. In 1989, Truman's closed the Brick Lane site. When the gates shut, something intangible vanished too. The sound, the smell, the sense of continuity. Brick Lane survived, but it was no longer a brewing street, just a place where brewing once happened. 4. Whitbread Brewery, when 250 years still wasn't enough. Whitbread's history stretched back to 1742. For over 2 centuries, it adapted, survived wars, recessions, rationing, and social change. Whitbread Pale Ale and Tankard were fixtures in pubs across England, served without fuss, trusted without question. This was brewing as institution. By the 20th century, Whitbread had become one of Britain's largest brewers. Powerful, respected, but size brought a different kind of pressure. Shareholders demanded growth beyond beer, hotels, coffee, leisure. Brewing became just one line in a portfolio. In the early 2000s, Whitbread made its choice. Brewing was sold off. Production ceased. The name that once stood for British beer quietly stepped away from it altogether. There was no single closing night. No final pint marked in the papers. Just a slow withdrawal from something it had helped define. When Whitbread left brewing, it proved a sobering truth. Even centuries of heritage offer no protection in a modern balance sheet. 5. Bass Brewery, the red triangle fades. Bass was once the most recognizable beer brand on earth. Founded in Burton-upon-Trent, its red triangle became the world's first registered trademark in 1876. The town itself lived and breathed brewing, its mineral-rich water producing beers exported across the empire. Bass wasn't just famous, it was global. By the mid-20th century, Bass Ale symbolized British quality. It appeared in paintings, posters, and pubs from London to New York. Burton thrived. Thousands worked in breweries that never seemed likely to fall silent. But consolidation came. Bass merged, split, and was absorbed. Brewing operations were reduced, then removed. By the early 2000s, Bass was no longer brewed in Burton at all. The town that built the brand lost it. Today, the red triangle survives mostly as a logo, a memory. Burton-upon-Trent remains, but its identity as the beating heart of British beer was quietly taken away, pint by pint. 6. Ind Coop, everywhere until it wasn't. For much of the 20th century, Ind Coop was simply part of the background of British life. Founded in Burton-upon-Trent in the 1700s, it grew into a name seen on taps from Midlands towns to seaside resorts. Ind Coop ales weren't loud or fashionable. They were steady, ordinary, reliable. By the 1950s and 60s, Ind Coop pubs formed a quiet network across England. You didn't travel to drink Ind Coop, you encountered it. After work, before the match, on a Sunday lunchtime, with family. The beer didn't demand attention, which is precisely why people trusted it. But that ordinariness made it vulnerable. As mergers swept through British brewing in the 1960s, Ind Coop became part of vast corporate combinations, eventually folded into Bass Charrington. Decisions moved away from Burton. Brewing capacity was rationalised, sites closed. There was no dramatic ending, no outcry. Ind Coop just disappeared. One day the name was on the pump, another day it wasn't. And only later did drinkers realise how strange it felt when something so familiar was suddenly gone. 7. Tetley Brewery, when Leeds lost its taste. On Tetley was Leeds in liquid form, brewed at the massive Airy Street Brewery from the 1820s. Tetley bitter became inseparable from the city's identity. This was the pint of factory workers, office clerks, and rugby league supporters. Smooth, balanced, always there. For generations, the brewery dominated the riverside. Steam rose from copper vessels. Delivery drays crossed the city daily. Leeds didn't just drink Tetley, it worked for it. Thousands of families depended on that red Tetley star. By the 1980s and 90s, ownership had shifted. Brewing was consolidated elsewhere. Despite protests and petitions, the Airy Street Brewery closed in 2011. Production moved hundreds of miles away. The beer survived in name. The place did not. Many Leeds drinkers still say the pint never tasted quite the same again. Because it wasn't just about flavour, it was about knowing your beer came from just down the road. When Tetley left Leeds, the city lost a piece of itself. 8. Boddington's Brewery, the cream that left Manchester. Boddington's was Manchester's badge of honour, brewed in strange ways since the late 19th century. Its pale, hoppy bitter stood apart from darker northern ales. The cream of Manchester wasn't just marketing, it was a statement of pride. By the 1970s, Boddington's was everywhere in the city. Pubs, clubs, backstreet locales. The beer matched Manchester's character, confident, a little sharp, unmistakably its own. Brewery workers were known faces. The plant was part of the skyline. Then came expansion, national advertising, ownership changes. By the early 2000s, brewing ceased in Manchester altogether. The Strangeways site closed. The beer lived on, but brewed elsewhere, by someone else. Manchester noticed. The slogan remained, but the meaning drained away. What was once rooted in place became just another brand, and a city that prided itself on making things watched one of its own quietly leave. 9. Scottish and Newcastle. When the North was sold off, Scottish and Newcastle was never a single brewery. It was a collection of them. A web of regional beers that reflected Scotland and Northern England's diverse drinking cultures. Newcastle Brown Ale, McEwan's, Tennant's, each tied to place, accent and habit. For decades, the company represented northern brewing power. Decisions were made close to home. Jobs stayed local. Breweries anchored communities in cities like Edinburgh and Newcastle. But in 2008, everything changed. Scottish and Newcastle was broken up and sold to foreign multinationals. Assets were divided. Breweries closed or downsized. Production shifted. Brands survived, but often stripped of their local roots. To many drinkers, it felt like a sale of identity. The beer might still be on the shelf, but the ownership, the workforce, and the connection were gone. The North didn't stop drinking, but it stopped owning what it drank. 10. Cameron's Brewery, a small town's big loss. In Hartlepool, Cameron's was more than a brewery. Founded in 1865, it employed generations of local families. Its beers were poured at weddings, wakes, and working men's clubs. This was brewing at human scale, personal, familiar. The brewery whistle marked time, shift changes, delivery runs, lunch times. Cameron's pubs weren't just businesses, they were meeting places, safe spaces, social glue in a tough industrial town. Ownership changes in the late 20th century brought uncertainty. Production was reduced. Jobs were lost. Brewing moved elsewhere. While the name lingered in various forms, Hartlepool lost the daily presence of its brewery. For many locals, the loss wasn't about economics alone. It was about dignity, about seeing something made there, by their people, When Cameron stopped brewing locally, Hartlepool lost a quiet symbol of who it was. 11. Burton upon Trent, a town built on beer. For more than a century, Burton upon Trent didn't just brew beer, it was beer. Thanks to its mineral-rich water, the town became the beating heart of British brewing from the 19th century onward. Bass, Incoop, Worthington, names that travelled the world, all rooted in this quiet Staffordshire town. At its peak in the early 1900s, over 30 breweries operated here. Entire streets worked the trade. Maltings, cooperatives, bottling plants. Brewing shaped daily life, wages, accents, and pride. To be from Burton meant something, but consolidation hollowed it out. One by one, breweries closed or moved production elsewhere. Jobs vanished. Buildings were demolished or repurposed. By the early 2000s, Burton still existed, but its purpose had shifted. Today, visitors see museums where factories once roared. The water is still there, the history too. But the sound of a town living off beer has faded into memory. 12. Brick Lane, when beer gave way to coffee. Brick Lane once smelled of yeast and steam. For generations, breweries like Truman's dominated the area, feeding pubs across East London. Brewing shaped the rhythm of the street. Early starts, shift whistles, wagons moving through narrow lanes. Then came deindustrialization, then property, then reinvention. By the late 20th century, breweries were gone, replaced by studios, markets, cafes, and vintage shops. The air changed, the sounds changed, the people changed. Brick Lane survived by becoming something new, trendy, busy, global. Yet beneath the surface, locals still remember what stood there before. The jobs, the smells, the certainty of routine. Walk the street today and you'll find plaques, photos, fragments of brickwork. Quiet reminders that before oat lattes and street food, this was a working brewing street. A place where beer wasn't consumed. It was made. 13. The pubs remain, but the beer has gone. Across Britain, the pubs still stand. The signs swing. The names remain. The buildings look familiar, but behind the bar, something fundamental has changed. The beer is no longer brewed nearby. It arrives by lorry from distant factories, tasting the same everywhere. In the 1950s and 60s, many drinkers knew exactly where their pints came from. A local brewery, a known workforce, sometimes a neighbour. That connection mattered more than people realised at the time. As breweries disappeared, pubs became outlets rather than extensions of local industry. The social space survived, the supply chain did not. And with it went a sense of ownership. The pub remained Britain's living room, but the beer lost its accent. More clang. A younger generation asks, why did they disappear? For younger drinkers, these names sound almost mythical. Watney's, Courage, Tetley brewed in Leeds. Ideas from another Britain, a slower one, a more local one. So why did they vanish? The answers are unromantic. Rising costs, property values, tax pressures, corporate mergers, systems designed for scale, not place. In 2024 alone, over 100 independent breweries closed across the UK, according to industry bodies. What was lost wasn't just beer, it was continuity, identity, the feeling that what you drank came from where you lived. And that leaves one final question hanging. Not just about beer, but about Britain itself. What else have we let disappear without noticing? What we've seen in this journey is not simply the disappearance of breweries, but the quiet fading of a Britain that once brewed its identity street by street, town by town. From London's great names to northern factory towns and streets shaped by steam and malt. These breweries were never just businesses. They were routines, livelihoods, and shared memories poured into a pint. If you'd like to continue exploring more top list stories about forgotten British brands and places from the 1950s to the 1980s, click through to our next videos and keep traveling back in time with us. And if these stories stirred something familiar, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing what you remember or what surprised you most. Until next time, thank you for watching. Take care, and we'll see you again very soon.